Welcome to Chapter 11, The Miracle of Charlotte's Web. Before I start reading, I want to give instruction on today's assignment. As you listen and follow along while I read, I want you to envision the scenes in your mind as we go along. And I want you to have out a white piece of paper and something to draw with, because you are going to make illustrations of what you hear and envision as we read this chapter. And then at the end, I want you to make sure to label your illustration with the various characters that were in this chapter and label the main idea of what happened in this chapter. Once you complete your illustration, you can go to reading in our Google Classroom, because for your interactive novel log, you are going to head into Seesaw with that link, and you will upload your illustration into the activity for your interactive novel log. So, pause this video if you need to go get a piece of paper and pencil so that you can change anything, maybe that you made a mistake or go back or see spelling errors, and make sure you do that as you read. This can help you with comprehension and understanding the story a little bit deeper as we go through the chapter. All right, here we go. The miracle. The next day was foggy. Everything on the farm was dripping wet. The grass looked like a magic carpet. The asparagus patch looked like a silver forest. On foggy mornings, Charlotte's Web was truly a thing of beauty. This morning, each thin strand was decorated with dozens of tiny beads of water. The web glistened in the light and made a pattern of loveliness and mystery, like a delicate veil. Veil? Do you recognize that word? Veil is a fine piece of clothing. Some of you might know veil as in a veil that a bride might wear at her wedding. So if you can think of that veil and how delicate it is, and they're likening that to the loveliness of her web. Even Lurvy, who was particularly interested in beauty, noticed the web when he came with the pig's breakfast. He noticed how clearly it showed up, and he noted how big and carefully built it was. And then he took another look, and he saw something that made him set his pail down. There, in the center of the web, neatly woven in block letters, was a message. It said, "Some pig." Lurvy felt weak. Do you think you would feel weak if you came out to see a spider web that had words written into it? I think I might feel a little bit weak. He brushed his hand across his eyes and stared harder at Charlotte's web. I would be in disbelief too. That would be hard to comprehend. What do you think? "I'm seeing things," he whispered. He dropped to his knees and uttered a short prayer. Then, forgetting all about Wilbur's breakfast, he walked back to the house and called Mr. Zuckerman. "I think you'd better come down to the pig pen," he said. "What's the trouble?" asked Mr. Zuckerman. "Anything wrong with the pig?" "Not exactly," said Lurvy. "Come and see for yourself." What do you think Mr. Zuckerman's going to think? Will he be in disbelief as well? The two men walked silently down to Wilbur's yard. Lurvy pointed to the spider web. "Do you see what I see?" he asked. Zuckerman stared at the writing on the web. Then he murmured the words, "Some pig?" Then he looked at Lurvy. Then they both began to tremble. Charlotte, sleepy after her night's exertions, all the energy she had to put into that, so she's pretty tired, smiled as she watched. Wilbur came and stood directly under the web. Some pig, muttered Lurvy in a low voice. Some pig, whispered Mr. Zuckerman. They stared and stared for a long time at Wilbur. Then they stared at Charlotte. You don't suppose that spider, began Mr. Zuckerman, but he shook his head and didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he walked solemnly back up to the house and spoke to his wife. Edith, something has happened, he said, in a weak voice. He went into the living room and sat down, and Mrs. Zuckerman followed. I've got something to tell you, Edith, he said. You'd better sit down. Mrs. Zuckerman sank into a chair. She looked pale and frightened. Edith, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, I think you had best be told that we have a very unusual pig. A look of complete bewilderment came over Mrs. Zuckerman's face. Bewilderment. What do you think that word might mean? After he tells her about having an unusual pig, she might be feeling probably confused. Bewilderment's another word for confusion. Wondering, what is he going to tell me about our pig? How could he be so unusual? Homer Zuckerman, what in the world are you talking about? She said. This is a very serious thing, Edith, he replied. Our pig is completely out of the ordinary. What's unusual about the pig? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman, who was beginning to recover from her scare. Well, I don't really know yet, said Mr. Zuckerman, but we have received a sign. Edith, a mysterious sign. A miracle has happened on this farm. There is a large spider's web in the doorway of the barn cellar, right over the pig pen. And when Lurvy went to feed the pig this morning, he noticed the web because it was foggy. And you know how a spider's web looks very distinct in a fog? Distinct, easy to see. And right bang in the middle of the web, there were words. Some pig. The words were woven right into the web. They were actually part of the web, Edith. I know because I have been down there and seen them. It says some pig, just as clear can be. There can be no mistake about it. A miracle has happened and a sign has occurred here on Earth, right on our farm, and we have no ordinary pig. Well, said Mrs. Zuckerman, it seems to me you're a little off. It seems to me we have no ordinary spider. Oh, no, said Zuckerman. It's the pig that's unusual. It says so, right there in the middle of the web. Maybe so, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Just the same, I intend to have a look at that spider. It's just a common gray spider, said Zuckerman. They got up, and together they walked down to Wilbur's yard. You see, Edith, it's just a common gray spider. Wilbur was pleased to receive so much attention. Lurvy was still standing there, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman, all three, stood for about an hour, reading the words on the web over and over, and watching Wilbur. Charlotte was delighted with the way her trick was working. She sat without moving a muscle, and listening to the conversation of the people. When a small fly ran into the web. Just beyond the word pig, Charlotte dropped quickly down, rolled the fly up, and carried it out of the way. After a while, the fog lifted. The web dried off, and the words didn't show up so plainly. The Zuckermans and Lurvy walked back to the house. Just before they left the pig pen, Mr. Zuckerman took one last look at Wilbur. You know, he said, in an important voice, I've thought all along that that pig of ours was an extra good one. He is a solid pig. That pig is as solid as they come. You notice how solid he is around the shoulders, Lurvy. Sure I do, said Lurvy. I've always noticed that pig. He's quite a pig. He's long and he's smooth, said Zuckerman. That's right, agreed Lurvy. He's as smooth as they come. He's some pig. You can tell by their dialogue and their interactions that... Is Charlotte's plan working? I think so. All of a sudden, they're starting to think this is some amazing pig. Do you think they thought that before the web? It didn't seem like it. They never spoke like this about Wilbur before. Charlotte maybe had a good plan, didn't she? When Mr. Zuckerman got back to the house, he took off his work clothes and put on his best suit. Then he got into his car and drove to the minister's house. A minister is like a leader of a church. So he was going to talk to someone at the church about what he had seen. He stayed for an hour and explained to the minister that a miracle had happened on the farm. So far, said Zuckerman, only 4 people on earth know about this miracle. Myself, my wife Edith, my hired man Lurvy, and you. Don't tell anybody else, said the minister. We don't know what it means yet. Perhaps if I give thought to it, I can explain it in my sermon next Sunday. His sermon is his speech, or what he talks to the people about at church. There can be no doubt that you have a most unusual pig. I intend to speak about it in my sermon and point out the fact that this community has been visited with a wondrous animal. By the way, does the pig have a name? Why, yes, said Mr. Zuckerman. My little niece calls him Wilbur. She's a rather queer child, full of notions. Notions are beliefs, lots of beliefs. Remember when she was telling her parents about the conversations that she was having with the animals? And they were wondering if her head was on straight. So that's where notions comes from. She is full of beliefs. She raised the pig on a bottle, and I bought him from her when he was a month old. He shook hands with the minister and left. Secrets are hard to keep. Long before Sunday came, the news spread all over the county. Everybody knew. That would be a pretty hard secret to keep. Everybody knew that a sign had appeared in a spider's web on the Zuckerman place. Everybody knew that the Zuckermans had a wondrous pig. People came from miles around to look at Wilbur and to read the words on Charlotte's web. The Zuckermans' driveway was full of cars and trucks from morning till night. Fords and Chevys and Buick Roadmasters and GMC pickups and Plymouths and Studebakers and Packards and DeSotos with gyromatic transmissions and Oldsmobiles with rocket engines and Jeep station wagons and Pontiacs. The news of the wonderful pig spread clear up into the hills, and the farmers came rattling down in buggies and buckboards to stand hour after hour at Wilbur's pen admiring the miraculous animal. All said they had never seen such a pig before in their lives. When Fern told her mother that Avery had tried to hit the Zuckerman spider with a stick, Mrs. Arable was so shocked that she sent Avery to bed without any supper as punishment. In the days that followed, Mr. Zuckerman was so busy entertaining visitors that he neglected his farm work. He wore his good clothes all the time now, got right into them when he got up in the morning. Mrs. Zuckerman prepared special meals for Wilbur. Larry shaved and got a haircut, and his principal farm duty, his most important duty as of now, was to feed the pig while people looked on. Mr. Zuckerman ordered Lurvy to increase Wilbur's feedings from 3 meals a day to 4 meals a day. The Zuckermans were so busy with visitors, they forgot about the other things on the farm. The blackberries got ripe, and Mrs. Zuckerman failed to put any blackberry jam. The corn needed hoeing, and Lurvy didn't find time to hoe it. On Sunday, the church was full. The minister explained the miracle. He said that the words on the spider's web proved that human beings must always be on the watch for the coming of wonders. All in all, the Zuckerman's pig pen was the center of attraction. Fern was happy, for she felt that Charlotte's trick was working and that Wilbur's life would be saved. But she found that the barn was not nearly as pleasant. Too many people. She liked it better when she could be all alone with her friends, the animals. So we can see that her plan is working. And everyone's interested in Wilbur now and thinks he's so important. They're not thinking about, when it's time to get rid of him. So if you think about that conflict and Wilbur being killed, as of now, it looks like that conflict is being postponed, and Charlotte has increased Wilbur's ability to live. But with that comes consequences, right? And now, some of those consequences she sees are more people at the farm and not as much care being taken for all the other animals and things on the farm. So we'll see what happens next in chapter 12, a meeting. Look down at your paper. See all the different illustrations and people and settings that you've put down. Connect your pictures with labels, and then head over to Seesaw to upload your picture and explain your illustrations and labels about what we read today. And then we'll pick up with chapter 12. I can't wait to see all your drawings.